It's David and Julie at Brain Life Center. And for those of you that are just coming in, we thought we'd give it just a couple of minutes, but we do appreciate you joining us. Tonight is going to be a conversation with a special guest, Brenton Place. I'll be introducing him shortly, but just know that we're going to be focusing on depression tonight and kind of that range of things that people connect with depression. It'll be interesting because even the conversation around a lack of motivation, what it feels like to not want to get up in the morning, what's the point, why get out of bed? We've been doing this, as many of you know, for about 15 years, and we are going to be sharing a lot of what we've learned, but most importantly, Brenton Place, he has his degrees in psychology. He's a licensed therapist, got a degree in counseling as well, and he's the owner a clinic in Oxford. It's a Christian counseling clinic.
Lake
it's
Orion.
called, oh, thank you.
Lake
it's
Orion.
in Lake Orion, yes.
Treeside Psychological
Thank
Center
you.
in Lake Orion.
I knew that. But anyway, yeah, Treeside Psychological Clinic in Lake Orion. He's the owner and partner, but they have been around for quite a while. We also had an opportunity to work with Brenton. So he knows these technologies more than most counselors. And he's worked with people. In fact, we've talked about things such as he talked about kind of when you bring the technologies together with a counseling, a set of counseling sessions, the power that is very strong. We've joked about it being kind of like counseling on steroids because the speed at which people start to see things and understand things and move forward can be dramatically increased. So we're going to be bringing him in just a little bit. As people come in, yeah.
Before we get started with all of that, though, I just want a couple things. If you're joining us, if you could just share this with others, because we want to get the word out. I know that Brenton's time with us is going to be valuable. If you know anyone struggling with depression, anxiety, I think they'll find this really helpful, even just listening to Brenton and some of the input he has, even describing what depression is, what is anxiety, why do they often come together. There's just so much to be learned tonight. So if you know anyone, just share it with them. I think they'll be thankful and they'll thank you for it. It's going to be good information. Also, there's these gifts sitting here behind us, and I just want to mention them. Anyone who calls and does a discovery consult, but before 8 o'clock today, before this is ending, will receive $100 off services plus this gift right here. And then we're doing 3 drawings with, I believe, over 2,000 in giveaways towards our services, but also, as you can see, beautiful gifts as well. And so anyone who schedules a discovery consult, what did I say?
Yes.
Schedules a discovery consult is going to be in those drawings. And I think
Can you see that?
it'd be a great thing to do. We have people at the phones right now at 248-922-9490 and all throughout this time. So just wanted to get that out of the way before we start with Brenton, but that's what these gifts are behind us.
Yeah, if you just schedule a discovery consultation, as Julie mentioned, you get this automatically when you show up. But also, you're that 60% off. You'll get the 60% off if you just call in or you just schedule it online. But anyway, we wanted to do this for people who are joining us and might be doing that tonight.
So those are $39 discovery consults, right? So that's really a great thing. So just wanted to get that out there before we get started. And hello for anyone who's with us. We're glad that you're here. I don't know, when do we want to bring Brenton forward?
Any minute. We just wanted to give a few minutes for people to join us. Like Julie said, if you have questions, just know that, we're kind of focusing on depression, how these technologies have helped thousands of people with depression. And you're going to get the perspective of in my opinion, one of the best counselors out there who's also coming from a Christian perspective, which is kind of interesting when you're talking about depression. So think of questions that you might ask Brenton as well, but also ask me and Julie anything that you'd like. And we'll be taking those questions. We have somebody behind the scenes who will be taking those questions. You do this right on Facebook Live, and she'll be sharing them with us. And so we'll be answering those questions a little later today or a little later this evening.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what do you think? We wanted to welcome people in for just a little bit.
You wonder who we're talking to. We're talking to Justin. You can't see him, but he's keeping us in line here. So
yeah, we got a team of people helping us make this all work.
Yes.
So Justin, if you want, you can bring Brenton in.
There he is.
And so as I mentioned, Brenton, he's the owner of Treeside Psychological Clinic. He's been doing this for many years. We had the opportunity of working with him here. He helped many of our clients. He also has sent many people to us from his clinic. So he's one of those rare people that really has a sense of the combination and how this can be. He calls it kind of a hybrid approach. Welcome, Brenton.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Will you give me the name of your place?
You got to move over just a little bit.
Treeside.
It's the Treeside Psychological Clinic.
It is.
It's in Lake Orion. I was established in 2000, and my wife and I took it over during COVID 4 years ago, coming up next month. And so it's a long established. It's a cool Victorian in downtown Lake Orion, and it was built in 1899. So it's kind of cool to be there. It just feels like kind of a part of history in multiple ways.
I know you're doing the Lord's work there. I know you're doing the Lord's work there, and that you guys have been a big impact on the community, not just Lake Orion, but with all that went on with Oxford. I know you guys have played a role in that. So thank you for all the work that you do in the community.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was. We did not know, obviously, that was going to be a part of our starting working there, but I think it was meant to be. And we came in pretty rejuvenated as business owners. You probably know what that's like. And we were ready to take on the task, and it was definitely God's timing.
Yeah, I got to say, I've been out there many times. We even went out there. You'll do like a weekend, or you do things for couples, or you used to. But it is an incredibly peaceful environment. There's something about showing up there, like you said, with the history of it. The garden that you have out back, the little yard, it's a beautiful place for people who haven't been there. All right, Brenton. So we're going to throw some questions at you, as you know. And if we want to start off, why don't you just give us a little general sense of what depression is and how you approach helping people with depression at Treeside?
Yeah, so depression, I would say, just from my personal experiences, probably about half of my clientele. Of course, that's a group of people that are seeking help. But that's pretty common, I think, in this field, and it may be true for you guys as well. It is essentially, it does include a lack of motivation, but people go through a process. A depressive episode is defined as somebody who has either a lack of energy or low energy. They also have little or too much sleep, little or too much appetite. The things they used to enjoy, they don't enjoy anymore. And just a general low mood. And if you have that for just a 2-week period, that's called a depressive episode. If you have that for months, that is major depression. The prevalence of that is amazing. We're talking about 20% of youth currently have that. And that's just diagnosed. That's not even including those who do not seek any help.
Wow.
And to me, that is just way too high.
Crazy.
COVID did not help this situation. In fact, it increased by 25% globally. And that's just over a matter of a few years. I mean, it's its own epidemic now. And there's so many theories out there as to why it's happening. But I know on my end, that's not my job. My job is to figure out how to help people move through it and past it. But it is shocking to me. Young people who just seemingly, it doesn't make sense on paper why an individual could find such sadness so quickly in life. At the age of 12 to 17, we're talking 20%, which is astounding.
It's brutal. I hate to see it with young people, but it definitely COVID and the whole COVID experience, I've had a lot of people just say, I didn't realize things could get that crazy in the world that quickly. And then it made them rethink a lot of things. Something I've noticed is, obviously we've seen a lot of depression, and we know that especially for younger people, but for a lot of people post-COVID, we saw a rise in depression. Something I've noticed, though, is when I'm talking to men of all ages, they seem to be less in tune or less able to really notice their own depression, whereas women seem to be a little stronger at this. And sometimes if it's like a married couple, sometimes it'll be the wife that says, hey, maybe you should think about, going to see somebody or doing something because you might be depressed. And a lot of the guys will be like, what? Depressed. They might see it more as a lack of motivation. So they'll have a different way of phrasing it. Do you come across this?
Yeah, and statistically, it's true. Also, so 100 the above average. If you just look at individuals that are taking medication for it, young ladies take it at 130% faster incline of rate than the average person.
Will you say that again, Brent?
Sorry about that.
Will you say that again? I missed that. What'd you say? 130%?
Yeah. So there's a normal rate of increase for individuals that are taking medication for depression. Young women are 130% above the normal rate.
Oh.
And so that starts at a young age when young men can't see it, and it goes into adulthood as well. And so, but men in general, they don't seek help as often. I also think that it seems more normal to be depressed as a man. They're not going to get a lot of feedback from their friends, generally speaking, because what they'll hear is, get it together, man, you're fine. Whereas they might get more empathy if they reach out to their friends if you're a female. And women are just generally better at communicating in this language of emotion.
Definitely. It is amazing how often it is the wife that gets the husband in, and it's very rare that it's the other way around. It happens, but it is amazing how women are a little more in tune with that. And then sometimes it might be their son as well, or their father or an uncle, but so often it's a husband. So how with these men who sometimes they think they attach it or associate it with weakness, what would you tell a man out there a lot of these guys are high performing guys. They're holding it together beautifully. They're thinking, I'm just going to work my way through it. I'm just going to muscle through. And maybe their wife and some other people that love them are saying, hey, maybe you should check some things out. What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I like to challenge men a little bit. I would say, what are you afraid of? Are feelings too scary for you that you can't talk about it? Right? Like, you can actually challenge the part of a guy the thing that keeps him out of it is also the thing that he needs to recognize is an operation of fear, whereas he sees it as courage to not need to deal with it. And so that I like to challenge men in that way. I think they see it as tough, but if they were, then they could handle talking about it too.
Good point. I like that.
Yeah, that's something we come across, and it's nice to know. Definitely men come from that standpoint. You got to challenge them and see the strength in being able to tackle something like this and move forward on it, as opposed to thinking it as a weakness. That's really good.
I have a little question. You mentioned medication, and I know here at our office, the 15 years we've been doing this work, a lot of times we are in a position, if we get with someone before they go that route, where they may not have to do the medications. Or sometimes people are on medications, and as they go through this process, they're able to work with their doctor to come off the meds. What do you think about the medications and how they're being, when you see clients and they're on medication, sometimes for years, how do you feel? How does that all work out with the depression and the results? And how do you feel the meds should fit into that experience for someone?
Well, I think that they definitely they raise the floor for in terms of how low you can go. I think that that's what they're good at, and they can help you move through a period of time where it's just too low to even get habits formed or to get into some kind of lifestyle that you want to get into, but you don't have the energy, motivation to do it. What they also do that I just talked about less is that it also inhibits the opportunity for joy. It limits that aspect of the experience. In my experience, and also I've heard other clinicians and researchers talk about this. So you can limit how low you can go, but you also limit how high you can go. And there are times to be low and there are times to be high. However, I believe it's a great thing to get through, just like a crutch helps you get through a broken leg or a twisted ankle. What I don't like to see is when individuals never go back and test to see how they can do without it, or it becomes the new norm. And they forget how they used to be able to feel prior to depression. They only remember how depressed they were, and they compare to how they feel now with the medication as being better, but they forget how they were capable of a higher level of joy as well.
Yeah, I know we've noticed, and even had the opportunity to talk to some doctors, some psychiatrists, and a couple of neuroscientists and neurologists, but it seems like the good ones are cautious, a little more cautious with the medications, and they think, okay, this is going to be a temporary, we're going to mark this in our calendar, and this is going to help you through a difficult time. Let's see if we can either wean you off or wean you down and have other methods by which you could naturally resolve this and make it kind of the new norm. But yeah, it is a little scary how it does seem that there's a lot of people that sometimes they just decide that that's the quick fix. And what we come across here is they think, well, I just resolved the problem. And then within about 5 years, sometimes sooner, sometimes a little later, and tell me if you've heard this, they have to increase dosage because they're getting diminished returns. And they go to their doctor, and their doctor's like, well, let's raise the dose. They get to a point, at least this is what I hear again and again. The doctor says, you know what? We can't increase dosage anymore. We're going to have to move you to something else. And then during the moving process, sometimes they get lucky and they find another one that works, but there's a bit of a spiral. And sometimes the second one doesn't work, and then they have to go to a third or a fourth. And then it's like 2, 3, 4 weeks of heavy depression, serious spiral. It really freaks these people out.
Yeah.
Do you come across this yourself?
Yes, regularly. There is a genetic test that's out for all psychiatrists, and it's available, but it is not covered by most insurances, which blows my mind. But it will limit any medication that will not work for you.
Really?
And I am blown away at how rare it is used. But every psychiatrist knows about it, but they don't even mention it because it costs about $800 to use it. And we have the ability to save people from guinea pig experiences year after year where they're just trying new things.
Yeah.
And so that's just another example of the broken process of psychiatry nowadays. Like they don't even use the tools that are available to them because they presume that these clients will be around for a decade or more. So we'll just try it out. And the average appointment is 15 minutes.
Oh, that's really
I talked with a
interesting.
really
I
good
didn't know
psychiatrist that I have faith in one time, and he
What's
said,
the name of it?
Wow.
What's the name of it? So our
it's just
listeners
genetic
can
testing for medication.
genetic testing.
So
Genetic
any
testing for
psychiatric
depression.
medication, it's just, that's the name. It's genetic testing. And if you tell any psychiatrist about it, they'll say, oh yeah, okay, like it's an option. But I mean, that's just an example, like, because it's a long-term field, but when you meet with the psychiatrist, you get 15 minutes. And so when I talked with a really good psychiatrist, he told me, he said, I don't think anybody should be on any medications for more than a year without either tapering off and trying to come down in a controlled way to see if something has changed, especially if it's the first time client. If they've been through that, half a dozen times, then I'm sure it's less important. However, but these are practices that are not happening. It would also be great if psychiatrists would ask if you've tried supplements. Have you tried exercise? Have you tried any changes in what you eat? Have you tried, for instance, what you guys do, right? Like this is just not typically on their radar. And in fact, I think it keeps them in business to some degree.
Yeah. We've worked with a number of psychiatrists, and there's some really good ones out there. And it is nice when it's kind of refreshing when their goal is to be cautious with the medications and move forward and maybe even get them off if possible. We worked with one gentleman at the DMC. He opened a traumatic brain injury unit, but they were dealing with a lot of people with depression. And he was saying that one of the struggles that he was having to face was some people they don't want to talk to him. They just want to come in and get the script refilled. And so for him to overcome that took a lot of extra time. And he shared that could be a struggle as a psychiatrist, trying to guide the people into something that might be longer term healthy, but might require a little more work on their part. There's a lot of
comfort in knowing that you're just taking the pill that you think helps.
Yeah.
Right. Or did help at first.
Right.
And it's really scary to challenge that.
Well, my husband had depression early in our marriage. This was like probably 18 years ago. And it was pretty intense. In fact, I learned from that experience that he couldn't think his way through that. Because I always thought if you just change your thinking, you'd be all right. He couldn't think his way through that. But he met a really good counselor who said, I'm going to put you on something just to get you through this kind of heavy spot you're in, but it's temporary. I think he stayed on it for 3 to 4 months, kind of got him through that, did a lot of work during that time. And then when he came off him, I'm not going to say the depression was gone, but he was doing okay. And then thank God that Brain Life Center came into our lives because he never had to go on medications again. He used our services here to break through that, and he hasn't had to go back and even consider medication, or he's never hit that dark spot since. But
yeah.
I love what you're saying, that there's other options out there. We often say that everybody should have a toolbox, and the toolbox should have more than just a hammer in it. You know, the hammer might be the doctor or the psychiatrist, but you want to have a lot of other tools in that toolbox for your well-being and your health. So I do want to tell you that Trudy, that's what I was
Oh, go. Yes.
There's a question here from Trudy.
It relates
She
to
missed
what we're
you
saying.
said about genetic testing, and she wants to know what that is again. She said she missed it. And we need Justin in here. Can you explain what genetic testing does again for Trudy, Brenton?
Yeah, so it's just as I understand it, it's just a swab of the cheek, and they send it into a lab, and then it will eliminate any medication that will not work for you. It can't say which one will, but we're talking about eliminating 2/3 of the medication options, so a physician can make a much more informed decision without just trying to see if something works, and it saves a lot of time.
Gotcha. So Trudy, I hope that answers your question. And they should all know about it. It's just not covered by insurance. That was another thing Brenton shared, but I don't know what the cost of it is, but I would think it would be worth it.
You say maybe 700-800.
Yeah.
And so just know too, I mean, that's 100% worth bringing up to your doctor, letting them know about it. If for some reason they don't know about it, or maybe they'll just go, oh yeah, we're familiar with that. And then you can have them implement that for you. But,
or just come see us
yeah.
and see if we can get you over that without having to deal with those medications to begin with. Or even if you're on the meds, this may help you be able to reduce those and move forward. So
yeah, I'll share a little story. I think you know this one, Brenton, but because this happened quite a while ago. But we had a woman come in who owned a facility. She actually had a physical therapy company, but she ended up spiraling into very deep depression, where it was very hard for her to even leave her home. Fortunately, she had a good husband. He brought her here. She ends up going through this. She sees some major improvements. However, she was on a lot of medications. And what she told me was she was able to measure a lot of these medications, how much was in the system. And one of the ones was, she said, well, I can't stop taking this one because it introduces serotonin and I can't produce the proper amount of serotonin. And basically where this led is she ended up measuring this carefully and sharing this with me. And of course, this is not my specialty, medication, right? We focus on these technologies. Anyway, she says she found out that not too long after she went into some depression again, after she had had her doctor guide her through weaning off a number of medications, except for the one that introduced serotonin. She tells me this. She said, it turns out her serotonin was coming in high, causing depression. And as a result of measuring that, she went back to her doctor. He reduced the dose of that medication and she leveled out again. And so finding that right balance when your brain starts to self-correct, sometimes the brain can actually produce more serotonin because it's functioning better as a result of these technologies. So I just want to share that because that Trudy had that question.
Yeah, it absolutely gives the brain a chance, right? Like
go ahead.
Pills, if that's your first go-to, I say pills, but you know what I mean, then you do limit the opportunity for the brain to give itself a chance to do these things. There's a lot of things that the brain can do given the opportunity. And I know what you guys do, mirroring the brain and giving it a chance to try and work it out is very, that is ideal before you go down a route of introducing it to a sort of foreign substance, right?
Right.
Will you share with listeners too, Brenton? You did work with us for 8 years, and I know you worked with some clients with depression, and you experienced what it's like with clients working with our technologies as well as the counseling. Can you share a little bit about that and how you see this playing a role for people?
I apologize. Your mic only picked up when you said, can you explain that part?
Will you
I was trying to read
explain?
your lips as close as I could.
I'm glad to know. I have to. What I'm asking you is, you worked with us, and so you were counseling with people that had depression, and then they went through our services, and you kind of saw how those came together and what the difference was with a client that actually went through the process. Will you share a little bit of that with our listeners? And I think, am I hearing that Brenton's going to get cut out in a minute, and then we're going to rebring
Yeah, we've got Brenton for about 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
all right.
What
we
I'll
will
do is when that goes away, I'll go back. Hopefully I'll get another link and I'll click on it and come right.
Yeah, we'll re-invite you. So sorry about that, but please go ahead.
So what was interesting to me is I could see when I worked with clients who had not gone through the process versus those that simultaneously were going through counseling with what you guys are doing. Neurofeedback, or what should I call it?
Yeah, that's good. It's specifically a EEG, audiovisual neurofeedback.
I'll say what you guys do then.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
However, so I would see the two comparisons. So I'd have a group of people who are going through it and those that aren't. And the ones that aren't, it was a standard counseling experience. I mean, it's helpful, it's beneficial. We're working people through. What I would find is often, and this is true in counseling in general, is you find clients get stuck. And it could be a trauma imprint. It could be like they might have all the information needed. They know what they have to do, but for some reason, they just can't get past it. And so they're frustrated. We're moving at a snail's pace, but trying to figure out a way to get through it. God can work anything, and he has, and he does through counseling. I found that I didn't have to work as hard when I was working with clients that were going through the process of brain life. What I would see is they'd run into that obstacle, long withstanding neurological pathway blockage, and they could see their way through it. Like suddenly the brain was more pliable, their options were more flexible, and they could actually move past seemingly a lot easier than the clients that weren't. So when I would see a client that was long-term that I had been seeing, and finally they're like, what is this thing? Can I do it? And they would do it. I would watch them move forward faster. And I'm like, man, we could have saved a lot of time. And they would agree. Like, yeah, for whatever that thing was, it doesn't seem to be there anymore. And it's funny, when they look back, they can't relate to it anymore. It almost seems silly for them.
Yeah, but that is, so will you describe what is a trauma imprint and why does a trauma imprint leave someone feeling stuck?
So trauma occurs, we can see it on a biological level only recently in history, but it actually creates a strong set of neurological, so everything that we're doing is based on neurological pathways. We're creating them, we learn something new, neurological pathway, boom, we make connections, new neurological pathway, our brain is filled with trillions of them. Well, when there's either a trauma that occurs, whether it be emotional or even physical, there can be this cluster that happens. And so that things get actually kind of stuck in that cluster. So where you used to be able to seamlessly move from one idea to another, you've got this jam on a biological level that occurs. But traumatic imprints in an experiential level just find us, and we know this through soldiers all the time, right? Everyone understands, why is a soldier reacting when he's not in danger? Something hits, suddenly there's a reaction. That is a trauma imprint that's way more obvious, but we are all walking around with some variation of trauma imprints. And so that can look like many different things. But I do know that when people were going through the brain life process, it seemed like it was just a lot more seamless to move through it.
I know something we noticed. What do we have? We've got about a minute. So we'll share a couple of things here. Justin and you will get you back if you're interested. I feel like we could definitely, if we can, we'd love to talk to you a little bit more.
Oh yeah, I'll be right back. I can already understand the process. I just need to click on the link again.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'll just share this based on what you mentioned. So, and you'll kind of remember some of this. Back in the day, we used to have to move these sensors around a lot more. As technology advanced, we were able to give the brain more of a three-dimensional view of itself, and it was much higher def, so to speak, even though this is sound. So it was just a lot more data being translated in less time. So the brain was getting more data. But back in the day, when we had to graph in order to select where we're going to put these sensors, we developed a lot of information, us and a whole team of people, and there's a number of people around the world, but it was around cortical balance. And there was a number of very measurable cortical imbalances, meaning, yeah, you can bring him back. I'll just keep talking, Brenton, but we'll see you shortly.
Yeah, Brenton did a lot of the brain maps and the graphing here.
The brain mapping and graphing was.
Oh, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But what was really interesting about this is that it turns out there were measurable cortical imbalances. So you'd measure like the right and left temporal. You'd measure maybe a front to back measurement from the occipitals to the frontals. And when you looked at lots of different locations and you watched them in relation to each other, we would see things that we've called splits. And so there's a lot of different things. There's splits, there's spikes of activity. There's these little triangulations that show things. Not to bore you, but the big thing was they were measurable imbalances. So just imagine a little spike of activity that when we compare it to the rest of the brain, turns out relates to some issues with irritability, with diminished communication between the right and left hemisphere. And we know certain things related to, it's an imbalance, it's showing up. We knew it related to different parts of depression. So when we worked with veterans, we would see this a lot. There'd be major splits, big spikes, and we'd go to those areas and let the brain see those areas the most because that's where we got the most benefit. So just know there's this really fascinating thing around the discovery of cortical balance and cortical imbalance, which can be picked up with EEG sensors. And when the brain sees this, we don't have to tell it what to do, but it'll start to self-correct. And these measurable cortical imbalances will start to adjust. They'll fall into balance. And when we ask somebody, how are you feeling, that was dealing with severe depression, welcome back, Brenton. When they're dealing with severe depression, suddenly the depression would start to lift and they'd be like, oh, I woke up this morning and I'm just horrified of getting out of bed. It seems pointless. And I'm actually starting to just naturally feel some hope. When we experienced that, the realization was, wow, there's a cortical imbalance. If the brain can see this, it'll self-regulate naturally. And the person describes feeling better. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I know you dealt with a lot of those graphs. We don't have to deal with them like we used to. But a lot of that's just built into this new technology. So what did you think of the graphs and the brain mapping?
It graphs on the fly, right? And so like, what an incredible difference. What would take sometimes 15 minutes to half an hour, it happens in a second, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
or
amazing.
faster.
Yeah, people had to sit in the chair for 2 hours and 15 minutes, what we can accomplish in 32 minutes today. So
yeah.
We don't have to move the sensors around. It's, technology, just like iPhone. It's come a long way. It's amazing.
Yeah, we used to be able to show it effectively a tiny little like reflection of its activity. And now it's a full three-dimensional reflection. And the speed at which the brain, it's like the brain is way ahead of the technology. The more the computer scientists are able to translate, it's just like, oh, the brain can handle that. And it looks like it probably can handle a lot more than we're able to give it. So we're looking forward to seeing when they might be able to feed the brain so much data in relation to this cortical balance that the brain actually goes, oh, that's as much as I can handle at this point. So far, we haven't reached that level. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
There were a couple really cool things I saw, like to touch on the trauma imprint thing and then also to the depression. The trauma imprint, what was so interesting is sometimes individuals, I remember, would not remember their trauma. It was that extreme.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't, the brain knew that they couldn't handle it, so to speak. And when they would go through this process at Brain Life, I would be working with them and they would suddenly remember what happened and then simultaneously let it go. They would describe it in different terms, but it was amazing to me. It's like the brain knew the person was ready to handle it. And it'd show the trauma and the person could release it all at the same time. And so like when it comes to trauma imprints, like that is just a miracle to watch happen. I've yet to see that happen in therapy. So that was really cool to witness. And then another thing, when it came to depression, what was interesting is I would see people come out and be lifted to some degree out of it. And there was this initial phase where they needed guidance and therapy because they suddenly became awakened to the world they had created with their depression, and they didn't like it. And a healthy brain does not like unhealthy circumstances. And so the circumstances suddenly became very difficult to see. And I could understand why they had been blind to those things for so long, because depression wants to keep you in its shell. And so the shell would break and they'd go, oh my gosh, like this is what I've done or my depression has done and created in life, and they would wake up and go, this stinks, and they would make adjustments, but they would make those
remember a lot of those cases
quicker. Instead of going back into the depression where it's safe and warm because they've been there for so long, they preferred to be outside of it. And that was really cool to see too.
That is fascinating. You were sharing, and I remember over the years you talking about how somebody, you actually used the phrase, they actually they love their depression, or they it's such a comfort zone. They've been doing it for so long that they're a little bit in love with their depression. Share with people what you mean by that.
Well, it's an old familiar friend, right? It becomes, depression has some secondary gains to it. When somebody is very depressed over an extended period of time, people in their lives really just kind of stop expecting things from them. This is a natural relational adjustment. In order to love the person, you have to manage your expectations, right? And so those expectations slowly go less and less, and that person, they don't want that, but they also, it's hard to imagine going back to having responsibility, right? They start to build their life around making sure that depression is their good friend or their comfort blanket, because it just gives you a break from the world. I do believe that there is some depression, and this is why you don't just get depression over the course. Like I can't diagnose somebody with depression who's been depressed, but at least major depression, if they've only been depressed for a month. Circumstances sometimes call for it, because a person needs to go through the process of separating from life, isolating a little bit, personal recovery, reflection. These are important things. But when it becomes your friend to cope and you don't go back, that's when it's problematic, and that's when you can't get back to your life. And so that's where people get stuck in it. And it's such a comfortable place to be sometimes, but it also simultaneously is so painful, because you can see the way people relate to you. You start to believe that you are isolated because they don't want you there, when really isolation is just what the depression started to give you a guide to take a break. But then it becomes a habitual pattern.
I'm amazed when somebody does sort of break free and it starts to lift. I think they're often surprised at how welcoming people are when they actually see those changes. Like they think that it's all destroyed. I worked with a vet that had gone through some serious trauma all the way back in Vietnam. So this is 40 some years later. And this guy, I mean, he's got a great relationship with his daughter again, who he didn't talk to or wasn't connected to for like 35 years. And he was surprised how welcoming she was once he started to make a little more sense, right? But I want to just mention something real quick. This is for the people that are watching. Two things. One is, please, if you call us, and I think the number's right below us, right? If you give us a call, you can schedule, just reserve a discovery consultation. Remember, we're allowing people to reserve these discovery consultations through the end of tonight till 8 o'clock. And you get 60% off, but also we're going to be giving you this little gift with the cup that's worth just over $100. So,
and they'll go into the drawings for the other
true.
Gifts as well. So there's a lot of opportunity.
So please do that. You can call right now. We have people at the front desk waiting to take those calls and guide you through that. That means you'll get to come out and actually see our office, meet the team. You'll get to experience the technologies personally. And we're going to sit down with you and specifically we'll dive in. It'll be me, Julie, it'll be one of our guidance technologists, but we'll dive into what you're struggling with specifically so that we can lay out a plan for you that would get you some results quickly. So if you really want to learn more about this, please do that. Tonight's a really good night to do that. Secondly, we've had some people throw some questions at us. So if you have questions that you'd like to hear maybe an answer from Brenton, or if you have a question, fingerprint. This is where we get our questions. But please, any questions you might have for me, for Julie about the technology, for Brenton about depression, or anything else, please don't hesitate. This is a good time to ask questions, and we will answer those shortly. All right, thanks, Brenton. I just wanted to cover some of that. Any other questions that I've got lots of them, but do you have any questions for Brenton?
A couple things. Brenton, when you meet with someone, you told me something interesting when we talked earlier about how you define depression and anxiety, because I know those often go together, but there's some unique differences about them. And I just wondered if you could share that.
Yeah, so anxiety is often really future oriented. This is a blanket statement, but it tends to concern itself with what will go wrong. And depression tends to concern itself with what went wrong. And if people can recognize the difference, then they have a lot more control over how they adjust their thinking. People with anxiety can think and worry about the past, just like people with depression can think about how things could go wrong in the future. But generally speaking, you'll find that people who are depressed tend to really run through the past a lot, but they incorporate shame and guilt into it. And then people that are anxious tend to really focus on what could go wrong, and they tend to incorporate a lot of catastrophizing and really just the worst case scenario. Now, there's a huge overlap only because so many people have both anxiety and depression, right? But if you can tease them out, that's generally what I've found. And so if you find yourself dealing with one more than the other, consider focusing more in both cases on what has gone well in the past or in the future. But if you are in depression, concern yourself less with the past to start. If you are dealing with a lot of anxiety, concern yourself less with the future and only focus on the things that you can and are willing to change now in this moment. And so it's interesting the way that we're designed and how we organize these different disorders medically. However, experientially, it's a lot more simple, I think, sometimes when you break it down that way.
Hey, I'm going to just answer a couple questions. Would you want me to cover one of these?
Sure, go ahead.
So Wendy's saying, do you help young teens as well? And absolutely. It's amazing for young teens who their whole life they've been online. They don't know what it's like to have a world without the internet and all kinds of crazy input from social media. So we see a lot of young teens dealing with depression, anxiety, a whole host of things, especially post-COVID, because for a young teen, we're talking about they might have been 11 when the craziness of COVID hit. And so another nice thing from our technology standpoint, a teen, they have a very, very adaptive brain. So they talk in the world of neuroscience a lot about plasticity. Teens have very plastic brains. So their ability to respond to this auditory mirror is much greater than somebody like me who's older and has lost some of the plasticity. So yes, we help with teens, and it's even a huge benefit if we can get somebody in a little earlier. But we've helped people from 5 years old, teens, and we've helped people at 95. So it tends to help the brain improve overall. There's another one. Is it Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin, you're asking about the estimated cost for the process, and you'd like a price range. This is difficult for us because we really need to meet with you. We have a lot of questions so that we can discern where you would land. So what I would suggest to you is do the 60% off discovery consult. Come see us, and we can dive into what's going on with your situation specifically and give you a recommendation for you. And if you feel like you need more than that, before you do the discovery consult, you can call our office and schedule a phone meeting with Dave or I, and we'll dig in a little bit with you over the phone. We don't want you to feel like we're holding back that information, but we just need to get some information from you so we can give you a good answer to that question. So either schedule a discovery consult, or if you're not sure you want to do that without more information, schedule a phone meeting with us so we can talk to you further and give you an answer.
Yeah, there's a lot to gather. And just so you know, with the technologies, our primary technology is the EEG auditory mirror, but we also have support technologies. There's a range of things that we get to choose when we're setting up a program for you. And there's just a lot of questions, and everybody's different. So please, and right now, because of the 60% off, it's a $39 discovery consultation,
right?
And we're going to spend about 90 minutes with you. So I promise you, when you're done with this discovery consult, you will have a clear sense of not just all the technologies we offer. There's there's support technologies, as I mentioned, but we also have what we call basically they're brain enhancing modules. Brenton helped develop some of these, and some of them are designed specifically for depression and then different types of depression. We just find that this optimizes what people are getting from the technologies. And also know that by the time you leave, sometimes the range is quite wide potentially, because in some cases, somebody comes in for a discovery consultation. We usually are able to help somebody in need every month, but also sometimes they have a unique set of circumstances. And I'll just give you a little sense of it. One is context. If you're a vet and you're going back into maybe the area where you originally suffered the trauma, you might need some more sessions and we'll set something up for you. If you're somebody who is going back into maybe an abusive relationship, that's an important factor in determining what we're going to do for you and how we can help. And then, in some cases, your age. If you're, like I said, if you're a teenager, we know on the whole, you're going to move much faster through this. And if you're in your 80s, all else equal, that might require a little bit more and a different approach. So anyway, the nice thing is this discovery consultation, we will make sure you definitely know exactly what we're recommending for you and what the cost will be. And not just money, but time.
Get in on these drawings, and there's some giveaways that might even help with the expense of it. So take advantage. But again, I would want you to know to call us if you don't feel ready to schedule that and you want to talk. We can talk by phone.
Yes.
You're chuckling, Brenton.
I got a question for you, Brenton. One of the things that we see here, and we're coming from a real practical standpoint, we see that people with depression, when they start to have breakthroughs, as you mentioned, it's kind of like pulling a veil back and they're starting to see a lot. And sometimes it can be quite intense. And one of the things that we have found is helpful is a little bit of guidance around meaning and purpose. So I know you have some unique things in relation to that and even a different way of looking at it. But do you come across things where you're helping somebody establish, if they reach a certain level, where you can help give them a little guidance as to what maybe their meaning or purpose in life is?
Yeah, if you want to stay depressed, the prescription is isolation, don't exercise, and don't have a purpose. And so individuals that do not have a purpose really do struggle to get past, because if there isn't a reason why would you leave depression? This warm, comfortable blanket that you've been sitting under that, yeah, sure, it makes it hard to do things, but why would I do anything in the first place? Right. And so being tied to some goal or purpose, whether it be children, whether it be work, your relationship with God, your fundamental purpose that you just inherently know that you have on this earth is to have some impact and to glorify or worship the one God. That is so essential to help keep you centered. If you can think about, if you were laying on your back, looking up, and blackness is coming over you, and we'll call this depression, right? And it's narrowing and narrowing where you can see the light. If you have a purpose, it can never totally cover you up, your sight through it, because that doesn't leave you. Even if you're not willing to move forward or feel motivated or feel like you can do something, that is your tether to the reason why you would ever move out of it. And so, yes, purpose is essential, I think, to moving through it. Because when I see someone without a purpose, I believe everybody has some purpose. They just don't know what it is.
They haven't figured it out.
This whole world is full of people who decided, not to be crass, to not end their life today. That's what the whole world is full of. And why do we continue to exist? Why do we want to get out of bed at all, or even stay in bed but live? There is a reason behind it, and you have to foster it, nurture it, and pay attention to it, and make sure that you connect the decisions you make to that thing.
I have found here, Julie has too, where some people in that, when they're not thinking clearly, when the depression is sort of, like you said, it's blinding them to some degree, that when they do start to have breakthroughs, they are surprised at the potential impact they can have. Even in a moment, like in 15 minutes, when they really start to see that they can have impact on other human beings. It could be I've seen them write a letter to a family member they haven't talked to in a while, or somebody that they love, and they'll just send a letter of gratitude. What it does for them is powerful, but when they see the impact it has on that person they send it to, it's like it's opening their eyes to reality. Do you have any particular type of guidance when you're talking to somebody where you're seeing the veils being lifted, that you might give them a little guidance as far as letting them see the impact they can have in a positive way?
Yeah, so obviously it would depend on each person's story, right? And what that specifically looks like. But there's nothing better than some of the tenets of getting healed, which is personal forgiveness, forgiving others. It's a lot of letting go is what it is, because depression really sticks to you even when you can see past it. And so you got to find these connection points. And oftentimes it can be bad relationships. It can be the way in which you just think you relate to others. So it can be a false identity. Like, I'm a person who is always a problem. You have to find a way to rid your, so there isn't a singular or really great simple answer to that. But I will tell you what I find is most of the tenets that are taught in the Bible are also learned through the process of research and psychology. And we're learning what the Bible has already been telling us for a while, that these things are really important. Right. And so prayer is essential to it. Even agnostics have to acknowledge what the research says about prayer. But there are, I think we inherently know what good is, almost all of us. It's figuring out which one can I handle and am willing to do at this point. And so there's a whole smorgasbord of options out there of the right thing and the good thing to do. Just make sure that you keep trying to do one at a time.
Awesome. The connection, I'll just mention this. Julie knows you can share a little bit, but we have a number of these brain enhancement modules, we call them, but it's where the neuroscience is suddenly saying, oh, this is extremely good for the brain, this addition that's been tried and true for many years, centuries in some cases. Turns out this is extremely good for the brain. And you mentioned forgiveness. We have this really powerful, we pick, they've done a few sessions. We have a set of sessions. We pick a time when we see that veils kind of being lifted, and we'll take them through this forgiveness module, which is in large part developed by a psychologist out of Alaska, but it's something that became international. And then of course we've customized it. There's the Corey Ten Boom part, but like we've both done these modules, and it's amazing the breakthroughs, Brenton, when somebody experiences this and they're seeing forgiveness in a more realistic and practical way. It can be powerful what you see. I mean, their whole body kind of changes based on this new understanding of what forgiveness is, whether it's forgiving yourself or forgiving others. But what have you noticed in the experiencing and actually taking somebody through the forgiveness?
Well, when we go through it, because we'll do that in the office, it's often just a breakthrough.
I think it takes about 10 seconds for your mic to pick up.
Oh, really?
So you know.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
We'll have to fix that next time.
Yeah,
But once it
Thank
gets
you.
going, I can hear everything you're saying.
Okay. Maybe I'm sitting back and sitting up. I don't know.
Maybe.
I would say that when we go through the forgiveness prayers, and sometimes there's two parts to it, like you mentioned, Brett, and there's the forgiving yourself and there's forgiving others. And usually, if we've chosen to go through that, we can see that someone is holding a lot of bitterness and unforgiveness. And I believe the Corey Ten Boom quote is, how does she put
a
that?
prisoner.
Yeah. I've heard a different quote that's very similar, but when you go to forgive someone, you feel that you're letting someone out of prison, and you discover that the person you're letting out of prison is yourself. So I think sometimes when people go through that forgiveness prayer, even in that moment of forgiving, they can feel that release for themselves to come out of that prison, because bitterness that you're holding within because you're not forgiving stays with you, and it's disruptive. So and then forgiving yourself, sometimes people don't even know that that's a thing until we go through the prayer, and it can be a breakthrough as well. So it's
very
beautiful.
intense to watch.
And sometimes then they have to take it home and process it more and do it. We can do it over and over. All of us have times we need to forgive on a regular basis, right?
Well, Brenton, obviously I could talk to you for hours, but we need to wrap it up because it's almost 8, which is crazy, but that went very fast.
I love your insights and really appreciate the way you communicate things. It's very clear, and I'm sure that it has spoken to people tonight. And maybe if they weren't here tonight, they'll hear from you. You can maybe share it with some folks too, because I think it's been really powerful. So thank you for that.
And I'm not trying to embarrass you, Brenton, but Brenton is truly one of the best counselors, one of the best people in this field. He's a Christian counselor. And I'm just blown away by the impact he has on people. If somebody's so fortunate to get in with Brenton, it will change your life. And of course, it was awesome to be able to work with him all these years. And it's pretty cool. He knows about us and what we do. But anyway, Brenton, thank you very, very much for joining us. And I know I'll be talking to you soon, but thanks for the insights.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
God bless, guys.
God bless you. Have a good night. All right. So in our wrap up, Justin just pointed out, we do have an important announcement that we wanted to make. We're going to be sending out some information on this, but basically it's this. We're going to be doing our fall open house. And we're actually going to be having Bob Duco here. We're going to have quite a few other people here, but just know Bob Duco is going to be here. We believe he's probably going to do a little sharing presentation and a Q&A. But we haven't got a final on that from Bob yet. So no pressure, Bob. But we're also going to have food and drink. We're going to be giving away, Wendy, what is it? Is it over 10,000? I know it was more than, okay. We're going to be giving over $10,000 in prizes away. And then we're going to be announcing a very special discovery consultation rate as we do that kind of revolves around the open house. But it's October 10th. And have we established the time yet?
5 to 7.
5 to 7. So 5 to 7. And that's on a Thursday?
Yep.
Okay. October 10th, Thursday. 5 to 7 p.m. We're going to be doing an open house. So for a lot of you who have some questions and want to come in, you're invited. We're going to be giving quite a few things away. We try to make it a special night. So
good food, good conversation. Yes. Try the technology. Bring friends. We love it. It's a good time.
Yeah, you show up the free little samples of the technology, and you'll discover quite a bit about us if you haven't been here before. You'll get to experience the tech rooms, the people. And Bob Duco.
Yeah.
A few others. Right.
So, I don't want to say goodbye without answering one more question that came through. I think it's important. Beth Ann asked, how long does it typically take to see improvements in long-term depression with the sessions? I'm going to say 8 to 12 weeks. Sometimes 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's 3 to 12 weeks.
And
Would that be fair to say?
Well, think about it. If somebody comes in from out of state.
Yeah.
They've done, what is it? It'd be 9 days.
Yes.
Right.
So there's a range, but I always like to put it out there a little bit. So the expectation is it might take some time. And if we get the breakthrough in 2-3 weeks, fantastic. But I think, say 8 to 12 weeks is incredibly fast for people who have struggled with long-term depression. So, and thank you, Trudy, for your comment. We did see it. We appreciate you. That's nice. We can't wait till you come and do sessions.
Awesome.
So. And
it's good to see some good news. Awesome. Thank you very much, Trudy. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Anything else I might be missing?
Anything.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
for joining us. God
bless you.
Night. And we hope to see you again soon.
Yes.